Okay, welcome everyone to our December Parks Forum session. Today we've got presentations from Dudley Council, and looking at the new National Nature Reserve at Saltwells, which is absolutely fantastic, and learning from them about how they've managed over the last 2 or 3 years with some pressure from development as well. So that's the first half of the session. Then we'll have a bit of a break for about 10 minutes. And then the second part of the session will be from Rodri Edwards from the Fields in Trust, and he'll be talking a little bit about something that they've got on the anvil at the moment, how they protect sites and the new toolkit that they're developing at the moment. And then Chris Warman is going to give us a bit of an update on where we're at in terms of COVID-19 and the various tiers that we're all in. So that'll be really handy. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Alan, who is going to try and share his presentation from Dudley. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you. And it's brilliant seeing so many faces that I know and that have been supportive through the years. I'm just going to try and share this slide. Come on. There we go. Hopefully, can you all see that now?
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, so this presentation is going to be broken down into a number of different sections, as we've already heard. Roughly going along these lines, as we've just heard again. So I'm going to start off and talk a little bit about Saltwells itself to give you a bit of a background. And then John, who is the chair of the Friends of Saltwells, can give you a little bit more information about some of our recent tumultuous times. And then I can do a little bit of a wrap up after then. And then Dr. Jonathan Larwood is joining us from Natural England and can give us a lot more information on National Nature Reserve status. And then Graham Walton, who's the Keeper of Geology at Dudley, has been absolutely instrumental in making the Black Country a global geopark. He's going to give us a presentation as well. And then over to the Fields in Trust. So we entitled this "How a Threat Became Our Greatest Opportunity." Because a couple of years ago, things were rather bleak, it has to be said. But for those few of you who I don't recognise, this is where the Dudley Borough is, right in the heart of the Black Country. And quick introduction to Borough: it's got just over 300,000 people. However, there's 3 million people right across Birmingham and the Black Country. So in our backyard, there's 3 million people, 3 million votes, and 3 million people who want to get out and about and enjoy their open spaces. It's got lots of historical importance, from a castle, one of the cradles of the Industrial Revolution. And the borough is very much seeing that tourism is going to be one of its future key economic drivers. So we're very much seeing the borough as needing to maximise its assets for the visitor economy. There we go. However, these are the indices of multiple deprivation which cover the Saltwells Nature Reserve. As you can see, the red is not an area that most people aspire to, with the green being the areas where you think you're doing rather nicely. So it's not in the most affluent of areas, with particular issues around income, employment, skills, and health, especially affecting children. So it's very much a key asset for people on its doorstep, and not just bringing people in from across the world as part of the Geopark, as we'll hear later. So Saltwells itself is, I'm going to keep saying National Nature Reserve because it's a wonderful thing, and I'm not quite used to it yet, which is excellent for me. It's in the heart of the Black Country. It's one of the biggest urban nature reserves in Britain, 2.5 miles long and 100 hectares. We won the first UNESCO Man in the Biosphere Award for excellence, and remains one of only, I think, 15. That number's a little bit vague at the moment. We've got 2 geological sites of special scientific interest, one of which is managed in partnership with the Canals and Rivers Trust. We've also got a scheduled ancient monument relating to mineral extraction from possibly Roman, but certainly medieval bell pits for coal extraction. And back in 2017, we were proud recipients of the Countryside Management Association's Gordon Miller Award, which is the award given for best practice across the countryside management sector. So on the left of that screen is a phase 1 habitat map. So you can see we've got a lot of woodland, which is in the green. And if you look in the middle of that woodland area to the central west area, there's a small little blob of orange next to a grey area. That grey area is going to be quite interesting in a minute for what John is going to be discussing. We're very famous for our bluebells, massive carpets of bluebells across the ancient woodland. We've got large areas of grassland, which are shown in sort of the orange terracotta colour, and a lot of those are managed by meadow management and also by Exmoor pony grazing. But a lot of our effort to keep us as good as we want to be comes from volunteers from right across the community, which are absolutely essential for the running of Saltwells and also for its vibrancy. And in the bottom right, that comes from a wonderful programme which we were carried out, funded through Tesco's, where we were carrying out mindfulness activities for people with dementia. So we do very much look at the needs of the people around us and see how we can encourage them to come into the nature reserve, and so it can help them, but also help us. So that's Saltwells. That's what a lot of people come from to come and see. And the tale we're going to hear next comes mainly, I think, and John will correct me, but for a lot of people, from the love of this one particular tree, which is a western red cedar in the heart of ancient woodland. And it's half dead, and it's not the prettiest of trees, but it's incredibly special, and the memories that are attached to this tree are what's kick-started a lot that's to come. So a bit of a quick timeline. In the mid-1800s, Saltwells House was built by the Earl of Dudley for his mother or for his mistress, depending which book you read. It then became used as a children's home. In 2001, that home closed. And this is on that grey area I've shown you on the map earlier. And in 2010, the building started to receive significant amounts of abuse. It eventually had to be demolished due to arson. And the warden's base, which had our classroom and our garage and facilities, was also had to be cleared away at the same time. And the council needed a receipt from that piece of land. Obviously, it was a children's home, so the money was going to go back into our children's services, which obviously needed investment during this time of austerity. And in 2018, the piece of land was then transferred to an arm's length company, which was half owned by Dudley Council and half owned by a private company, a limited liability partnership. And in 2018, a company called KB Extruders Pension Scheme put forward an outline planning permission for 19 dwellings on this part within the ancient woodland. So although it was knocked down and fairly rubble covered at the time, it was naturally regenerating very fast and had everything from common spotted orchids to 5 metre high willow and alder. So there's a map of where it is. The Merry Hill Centre, for those of you who have visited, spent or suffered, over there is shown in that aerial photograph. The red track leads off the Pedmore Road and into this area where Saltwells House once was, where they wanted to put in these dwellings, which looked rather nice and lovely, surrounded by ancient woodland. However, over to John.
Hi guys, real privilege to come and speak to you. As Alan said, my name is John. I chair the Friends of Saltwells National Nature Reserve, as I'm having to get used to saying, which is great. I don't know if ever you guys have seen the painter Bob Ross, the American guy, and he talks in his beautiful voice, which used to put my daughter to sleep, and she has a Bob Ross t-shirt now, age 16. But in Bob Ross's words, my involvement in the campaign and subsequently with the Friends group was a happy little accident. I was on Facebook one day, saw that there was a campaign happening, and a lady called Leslie Dunn, who was one of the real architects of the campaign in its early stages, was telling people that the local newspaper was coming down to take a photo about people that were objecting to the building of this development within the woodland. If you look at that picture, quite a few people turned out. I was of the opinion that with these things, normally it's like 3 people and a dog. So I thought, I've got a day off. It was a Tuesday. I'll head down. I was greatly needed in this photo. You can just about see my left shoulder in the bottom left corner, and a little bit of my beard, which formerly used to grace my face, and put me twinned with Alan in that respect. But yeah, so the community got involved, got incredibly passionate very quickly about this project. I think it surprised some of us, and there was a huge range of people involved. As I say, I just turned up to help out with this photo, to be another face in a picture, and thought that might be the sum total of my involvement. And happened to somebody came up to me and said, "Are you in charge?" I don't know whether the beard gave me a sense of authority. I said I wasn't, and I said, "I think it's this lady over here." I took them over to meet Leslie, who I introduced myself to as well. At that point, the newspaper came to interview Leslie and ended up interviewing me as well. Now, I didn't really know what was going on, but as Alan will tell you, probably my main skill is the gift of the gab. So I put some little kind of points together and ended up being interviewed for the newspaper. At that point, I think I'd put my boots too far in the project to walk away. So then I don't know if you want to click onto the next slide, Alan. Kind of my role, and something that I took up quite quickly in that, was this kind of media spokesperson role. We ended up contacting local radio, the TV, so with BBC and ITV, and they were quick to pick up the story. Alongside this, there was a huge kind of gathering of pace on Facebook. A Save Saltwells Facebook group was put together. There were petitions going out, posters being put up all over the place, and unusually there was a huge growth in the social media aspect. So when our traditional media and the TV guys saw that, they were very keen to jump in with the story. I've titled this slide "The Perfect Storm of People, Passion, Pictures, and a Pantomime Villain." We'll play the video in a moment, but one thing that I did was we'd got a tiny little drone at the church where I'm the pastor, and I went into the woods and decided I'd take some aerial pictures of the area itself and put together a little video with a bit of music, put it on the site, and see if that helped people to kind of get behind the project. Very quickly, it had about 6,000 views, and I realized that I needed to kind of keep this up. So I persuaded my wife to buy me an early Christmas present, got a better drone, and you'll see some of the pictures that were taken on them by the BBC. But when we play this video, you'll understand where the pantomime villain comes into the piece, where actually I think the very guy who was trying to get the project done was a huge boost for the project that we were trying to put together to get the planning permission turned down. So if that video will work, Alan, let's watch that. Have we got any sound, Alan?
Can't you hear that?
No, I can't, no.
Can anybody else hear that?
No sound
No,
from us.
sorry.
Okay,
No,
let me see if I
can't
can
hear
take
that.
my earphones out, if that makes any difference. I do apologise for this. It's playing very loudly and nicely at my end. Is that any better?
I think it's just coming through your speakers, Alan.
Right, in that case, if that's the case, I'm going to turn my speaker up as loud as can be so you can hear it. 1 second, I'll just have to exit the slideshow. Do apologise for this.
I think it might be a setting somewhere in sharing, but I'd say I don't know where. So try this approach first.
I apologise if there's a load of feedback on this. Can you hear that?
No, it's still not coming through, Al.
Okay. Bear with me, keep talking, John, and I'll see
That's
what
all
I can do in
right.
the background.
Well, you know, as we said, we kind of ended up on the media. I ended up on local radio twice and on TV. We ended up a little feature, I think, nationally on BBC Breakfast at one point. I had a call from some of my family down south and said, "Did you realise you were on BBC this morning?" To which I was quite surprised. And then I think from that point, as the campaign started to gain momentum, we ended up with involvement from all around the country. We started to, first of all, engage with people who'd been local to the area, who'd maybe spent time at the reserve as they were kids. Then we started to get people from all over the world step in. And what we realized was that we needed to harness the numbers that we were gaining on social media, not just to be numbers on a Facebook page, but to be actual voices in the campaign. So we went through this process. We tried to make it very easy for people to engage. So I was fortunate enough, as I said, being a church pastor, we got a building which was pretty close to the reserve. We were able to hold a public meeting there, which we live streamed. And I think we had something like 7,000 people watch the live stream. And we were able to interview some people that were already volunteering as part of the group that helps Alan and the other wardens. And then we made a place for people to be able to come and get involved in formal planning objections. Now, as that went on, Alan, I don't know, can you remember the exact number or the roundabout number of objections that were placed in the end to the project?
I can't. It was in the hundreds.
Yeah, I think we went up into the thousands.
Overwhelmed by them.
Yeah, so I was told by the guys at the council in the planning department that normally if there's a particularly strong objection, they'll get kind of somewhere between 3 and 10 submissions, and we were well into the hundreds. Even I think it may have gone into the thousands at the end. Incredibly strong feeling, but it was made possible really by a group of volunteers that came and sat for drop-in sessions, both at the church where I'm the pastor and also at the pub that's local to the nature reserve. People were able to come in, fill in these objections. We were able to help them get online and do that digitally, and that the snowball just kept rolling. I know my part was quite visible in it, but my part was being able to be a voice for some of the people who couldn't say what they were really feeling or thinking at the time. And also just being able to collate some of that information. There was a vast kind of amount of knowledge about the reserve, about its heritage, about its ecology, about its geology. And I was just in a position at the time to be able to kind of take that perfect setup and get it out to the people who needed to hear it. It looks like we won't get the video, but we'll send you a link to that.
Now, John.
Let's have it go.
Give it a go.
Signed an online petition.
Is that working?
Just about.
Beauty spot. Signed an online petition opposing plans for housing development of a Black Country beauty spot. Campaigners say the luxury homes could devastate the Saltwells Nature Reserve in Dudley by killing off woodland. The developer says there's a demand for eco-friendly properties. Here's our Black Country reporter, Ben Godfrey.
Saltwells was one of the first nature reserves in the West Midlands. Amid the lush woodland are reminders of its industrial past. Coal was quarried here and transported to steelworks nearby. In a secluded area where a manor house once stood, there are plans for 9 4- and 5-bedroom luxury homes, each with double garages. An online petition opposing the application has drawn 7,000 signatures, and campaigners, young and old among them, fear this green space will be lost forever.
If anybody builds here, it's going to massively impact on the environment, on the animals that call this wood home. We've got bats, badgers, newts. The track that actually comes in here from the dual carriageway, scheduled ancient monument of historic mining remains.
It's special for so many families in this area. We are not an affluent area, and this is our countryside. This is where our children play, where people cycle, where people walk their dogs. The destruction to the parcel of land would be irretrievable.
The developer is the Birmingham-based KB Extruders. It's a company that makes black bin bags. They told the BBC their proposal is entirely in keeping with the surrounding woodland.
It's very disproportionate to have a small protest in comparison to what the wider community wants. For some reason, it's being seen as, you know, we're trying to eviscerate the forest, or it's a deforestation operation. It's a regeneration scheme. The land in which we are hoping to develop is actually part of the existing nature reserve.
The competition to build in this area is fierce. Just see this new estate being built by Persimmon Homes on the fringes of the nature. The place is among those objecting to these plans on the basis that it could lead to increased antisocial behaviour. Dudley Council told the BBC it will consider the application in line with its normal planning procedures.
I'll happily succumb to the passion of the people if that's what they want. So if you've got 7,000 petitions, if they were to crowdsource their funding, I will happily sell the site to them. I believe that will come to about 40 to 50 pounds a person, and I'll sell it for the open market value appraised by a local agent. Small price to pay for something you believe in.
A passion for property versus a passion for preservation. The decision taken here could set the precedent for the rest of the region. Ben Godfrey, BBC Midlands Today, Dudley.
So if you were able to hear some of that, basically the guy who was talking at the end, if you didn't catch it, he offered to let us crowdsource the funding to buy the land off him. Now, there were a couple of problems with that. The first one, he didn't actually own it. So we kind of thought, well, that's not going to work. But the response actually from the community was incredible. Within 10 minutes of that going out on TV, I had someone knock on my door with an envelope full of cash, trying to pass it to me in the bid to buy this piece of land. I had so many offers on social media. We had to kind of put them right, tell them this guy kind of was, you know, getting a bit ahead of himself. But there was a passion, and there was actually a willingness within the community to invest. As Alan said, we're not a prosperous community. Were willing to put their hands in their pockets. They stepped out and they really kind of went above and beyond to make sure that this part of the woodland was first of all protected from being built on, and also then to make sure that it was given back and designated back to be part of the nature reserve, to make sure that this couldn't happen again. The second bit, if you want to move the slide on, Alan, and I'll whiz through, was we got involved in a political way in this. There were a lot of people with very strong political allegiances, part of the campaign group. But as we met together, I felt it was really important that we didn't get kind of bipartisan on this project. The picture there is a hot potato, and that was the phrase I used. I wanted to make this a political hot potato, that anybody in local politics that got involved with it had no option but to get behind the project. It was a ticking time bomb if anybody was going to support, against the great wave of public opinion, the building of the houses in the wood. We also weren't particularly bothered about who got some credit for it. There was a bit of initial kind of unwillingness to let certain politicians kind of put their name to the project. But in the end, we decided that the best thing to do was to set them up and give them all the ammunition they wanted for a home run. I didn't mind who looked good at the end of it, just as long as the outcome was that those houses didn't go up, that they didn't have the devastating effect that they really would have done if we'd have allowed this project to go through. So, Alan, do you want to chip in then on that, just that summing up bit?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, John. So, where's the site at now? I should say National Nature Reserve. The photo on the right, Liz, as you mentioned, that's our new Wardens and Education Centre, which arrived last week. And the land which was going to be put into housing by the bin bag firm is currently being bought back by the council to make it part of the nature reserve again. And also, thanks to Lawrence, our very helpful judge, we were assessed for Green Flag this year and won that award. So these are all things which 2 years ago we would have never have guessed would have happened. Thanks a lot to Jonathan, as we'll hear in a minute, for the National Nature Reserve. But the other three things were quite far out of our gift. And it is because of the community of where it's pushed that we've got the backing of very much of the politicians of both main parties and also the local community. So now we've got the Friends of Saltwells, which John is the chair of, with a wonderful website. We've got increased volunteering, except during these COVID times. Our visitor numbers are absolutely through the roof, as I bet most of your sites are as well. And our online ratings on Google and TripAdvisor are very, very, very impressive. There's some lovely comments coming through there. And the Facebook group, which John mentioned, which was there to, as it says, save Saltwells Nature Reserve, is still well above 8,000 members. So it's still a very, very active community forum for all things Saltwells. So that's where the community is at now. So, John, was there anything else you wanted to say? Jonathan?
No, just saying, you know, our real key was just getting people's involvement and identifying people's skill sets. We looked within the community. As I say, mine was talking, always has been. We found some great geologists, some people who were getting really involved in the ecology of the area, but also just people who were administrators. That was their gift. They were getting on Facebook, inviting people, getting messages out, you know, organising all the petitions and that kind of thing. The biggest lesson we learned was identify people's strengths and deploy them in the right areas. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. I must say, as an officer at the time, they were a very formidable but engaging force. They always came with the hand of friendship and always wanted to get people in the tent rather than to divide people. And I think that spoke volumes across all political sections and within offices of the council as well. We didn't get divisions, we didn't get fractures or anything like that, and it was just a very unified, friendly and positive group. So thank you very much, John. And over to Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I just mentioned to John, if you want that quiet evening in, I've noticed that Bob Ross is re-showing on BBC4 at the moment. Something to look forward to, I think.
My daughter's very pleased about it.
So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about national nature reserves. We've got a new national nature reserve strategy as well, and I'll also cover how Saltwells fits into all of that. So next slide, please, Alan. So national nature reserves, they were established back in 1949 as part of the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act. And their purpose when they were established was to protect the best and most important wildlife and geology, but they were also seen as laboratories for outdoor research into the natural environment. We've kind of moved on a bit to they still fulfill those purposes, but they're also very much places where we want to deliver and develop good conservation practice, and particularly places to experience and be inspired by the natural world. There's quite a range of national nature reserves from coast to upland. So that's the Lizard National Nature Reserve down on the southwest peninsula in Cornwall, pictured there. They're urban, like what we're talking about, Saltwells, through to the most remote of places. They're large and they're small. Down at the bottom right there is a small limestone grassland, Barnock Hills and Holes, which is just outside Peterborough, where I'm talking from. So there are 224 NNRs at the moment in England, and about 2/3 of those are managed by Natural England, and the remaining third are managed by what we call approved bodies, and they're organisations like the National Trust, the Wildlife Trusts, RSPB, and local authorities like Dudley Borough Council. So next slide, please. We have this new National Nature Reserve strategy, and we keep that standard, the best of geology and wildlife biodiversity and geodiversity, but within that strategy there's a new goal, which is to develop a network within the NNR series to tell the story of England's geological history. And to do that, we're going to use what we have. But when we start to find gaps in that, we seek to fill those gaps with new national nature reserves. And that strategy is across all the NNRs, and it's a partnership strategy involving all those involved in and responsibility for managing and looking after NNRs. So next slide, please, Alan. Briefly, let's just think about geology and national nature reserves and why we need that ambition. Well, if we look at the 224 NNRs, only 5 have been declared specifically for their geological interests, and they're pictured down below there. Charnwood Lodge, Wren's Nest, Horn Park, Hume Quarry, and Swanscombe Skull Site. I'll talk about those in a moment, just in a little more detail briefly. If we look further, 50 or so of the 224 have a notified geological interest in them. They're notified in part as a geological SSI, part of the Geological Conservation Review, which is what GCR stands for. But if we actually think about NNRs in totality, well, there isn't an NNR which doesn't have something geological about it. Sometimes it's really explicit. Rocks are visible right in your face. Sometimes it's a little bit more hidden, but geology is always there, whether it's shaping the landscape, whether it's part of the processes which shape and form the NNR, or the resources which have come from the NNR. Could be building stones, could be quarries, and so on. So geology is everywhere. We've just got to tease it out in the stories we tell. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we've got the 5 organised stratigraphically. That's in order of age, with the oldest at the bottom and the youngest at the top. So Charnwood Lodge, that's in Charnwood, which is just outside Leicester. Precambrian, some of our oldest rocks. Very familiar to some on the call is the Wren's Nest National Nature Reserve, Silurian rocks in the West Midlands, Dudley. Then we've got a gap, and just remember that gap. And then we go to Hume Quarry, which is Triassic desert sandstones and river sandstones, red beds. Hume Quarry, which is just outside Stoke in Staffordshire. Down near the south coast in Dorset, we have Horn Park, which is Middle Jurassic limestones, marine limestones filled with ammonites. And then the youngest there is the Swanscombe Skull site, which is about 400,000 years old. The site of the famous Swanscombe Skull, which came out of a sequence of Thames gravels in the Thames estuary area to the east of London. So next slide, please. I'm just going to return to the Wren's Nest National Nature Reserve, which, well, for us geologists is the most famous National Nature Reserve. And for those in the West Midlands, in the Black Country, in Dudley in particular, should be a well-known location. It's our oldest National Nature Reserve. It was declared in 1956. And it's a series of quarries and mines in Silurian limestones. They're 18th through to the early 20th century, the quarrying and mining. And today, the remnants of those quarries and those mines form a wooded hill, which is right in the middle of Dudley, with Wren's Nest Estate to one side and the Priory Estate to the other. Those limestones expose Silurian reefs in situ where they were growing in the Silurian. So the bottom left picture is a view over what we call the reef knolls, which then looks out over the Wren's Nest Estate. There are rippled beds on the site, which is the bottom right picture. You won't be able to see the detail, but mark my words, those are ripples on that bedding plane surface. And then perhaps best known is the beautifully preserved fossil fauna from the site. Top right are the fossil crinoids, sea lilies, and then we've got in the middle there the eponymous Dudley bug, which is a trilobite, Calimene blumenbachii, beautifully preserved, and it's been given its name because of its prevalence from the Wren's Nest NNR in Dudley. And then on the left, if you're lucky when you're out there, you'll spot Ian Beach, who's the senior warden for the National Nature Reserve for the Wren's Nest. Next slide, please. So let's turn towards Saltwells. So we've got the oldest NNR, the Wren's Nest, and then less than 3 miles away, we've got Saltwells, which was declared on the 23rd of October this year as England's newest National Nature Reserve. Like Wren's Nest, it's part of our industrial heritage. The local nature reserve and National Nature Reserve of Saltwells, it wraps around the former open cast mines, associated clay pits and the spoil heaps, and they're all connected by the canal network out into the Black Country and beyond. So pictured here, bottom left, we've got the Bruins Canal cutting, which is at the northern end of the National Nature Reserve. This is the bit which is managed by the Canal and Rivers Trust in collaboration with Dudley Borough Council. And that exposes slightly younger Silurian rocks than we see at the Wren's Nest, but connected to the Wren's Nest. And then we've got a group of younger rocks, Carboniferous coal measures, exposed within the canal cutting. A bit more of that later. If we go south of there to the southern end of the National Nature Reserve, top left picture is Dalton's clay pit, which exposes Carboniferous riverine sandstones, siltstones, and mudstones. This is the former source of the thick coal, which was a 15-metre thick coal seam in the Staffordshire coalfield, which was open cast mined here. If you look at the tree line across the top of the pit, that gives you a sense of how thick the thick coal was, because that's where it used to be. It's also, as the name hints at, Dalton's clay pit. It was the source of the bogs and basins of the Royal Dalton sanitary ware, So clay from here was used by Royal Dalton for their sanitary ware. So why is it an NNR? What makes it special and get that accolade? Next slide, please. I've been talking about Dalton's clay pit and Bruin's canal cutting. Well, they're both nationally important. They're both geological sites of special scientific interest. So it's nationally significant for its geology. Going back to the importance of these places for research, well, it has a really long history of research, particularly into the geology. And if we were to look at the Dalton's, the Bruin's canal sections, in there's a thin bed, which is known as the Ludlow bone bed, which produces a very rich shelly fauna and the remains of early fish. And it's been the subject of research for many years. Illustrated there in the middle is quite a recent paper, which is looking at the microfossils from the Bruin's Canal section, strange animals called conodont, which is an early ancestral chordate. So research is historical, but still very active. If it wasn't for the conservation and management of what was the LNR and what is now the National Nature Reserve, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, because it's that work that has maintained the visibility and accessibility to all those geological sections. So a lot of that is managed around a geological trail, which has been recently established as part of the Geopark, which Graham's going to talk about. So Alan and his team managed the exposures and the viewpoints associated with that geology trail. And here we've got Alan pictured with his high pressure portable hose cleaning down the sections as part of this is a tram line that approaches the Bruin's Canal sections. And then showing his care and attention, the insert is Alan's, it's Alan's patent Saltwells shrimp. And that is just for those more delicate moments when he wants to clear and improve the geological exposures at Saltwells. So there's a lot of attention goes on from Alan and his team. Across the site also, there's a lot of sculptural interpretation. There are frond waymarkers. There's a time totem pole at the entrance, and then if you go down into Dalton's, what you'll see darting around are these giant carboniferous dragonflies, Meganeura, which have been cast from the galvanized stainless steel sculptures, which are kind of bringing the place to life in a very different way. It's very impressive. Next slide, please. So lastly, and I'm nearly there now, if we go back to this idea and ambition within the NNR strategy, part of that was to tell this geological story. And there is a big geological story that's told at Saltwells. We've got those Silurian rocks, 420 million years old, with this fascinating fauna and these early fish in it. And then we've got all those rocks which are exposed within Dalton's clay pit and down on the canal section, which are 310 million years old. It's those carboniferous rivers and swamps which produce the coal measures and the coal which was exploited from the site. But we've also got, and Graham, that's Graham in the middle, who's going to be talking in a moment, spanning, his lower hand touches the Silurian and his upper hand touches the Carboniferous. He's spanning a missing 110 million years. So the story isn't only what's there, the story is what isn't there. And that was a time of uplift and mountain building and erosion with much less deposition in this area. So we don't have those sediments represented. So we've got environments which are there, but we've got a story about missing environments to be told as well between those seas and swamps. So it's that big story. Last slide, please. So this is my last slide, and I said look at that gap when I went through the stratigraphical sequence, and there it is filled by Saltwells, number 6 now. It's giving us something about the top of the Silurian in that geological story, and it's giving us a chapter in the upper Carboniferous, the coal measures, to help tell that story across the NNR series. And it's that very much that won it for Saltwells. It was filling that gap in the story. It had all the things going on, and then just that extra story to tell and fill a gap which we needed filling. A chapter and pages in that story which we didn't have, that won out very much for Saltwells as England's newest national nature reserve. So that's really what NNRs are and where they fit with where we're going with national nature reserves. I don't know if Alan has anything to add to that, but that's me concluding.
Yeah, I mean that shows the scientific place that that Saltwells fills. This is Dalton's clay pit, as Jonathan mentioned, and we've put in some new access features which very much help the public engage with the geology in a way that is relevant to them. So not necessarily bombarding them with scientific papers, but using sculptures to pique their interest and help them want to learn more. That's very much been the approach, because we're very fortunate to have the experts like Jonathan that can provide sort of the postdoctoral level information, but we want to be able to capture their imagination at the start to bring them through to that level. And also Saltwells, only part of Saltwells Local Nature Reserve is the National Nature Reserve, because only the central section has that geological story. So we still do have remaining areas of local nature reserve, which are still quite large, and they have some geological connections in terms of coal working or industrial revolution, but the main geological assets are within the central section, which is declared National Nature Reserve. One thing there you'll see on that map is there's a little cookie cutter bit out next to the N in the NNR, and that's the site we heard earlier from John in terms of the potential development being turned down. Very much we're hoping in the future, when that land is brought back into public ownership, that can become part of the National Nature Reserve in the future, because it does have a geological story to tell as well, with the Earl of Dudley's residence there. In terms of the benefits of National Nature Reserve to Saltwells, being selfish of what we're very happy and excited about, is high recognition of the natural features of quality, an increased profile of the site to attract visitors and boost the local economy, very much through the Geopark, which Graham will be telling you an awful lot more about, and also to help us have tighter partnership working. We've always valued the links with Natural England. That's always been very, very key to us. As Dudley, as we are the specialists, we are the site managers, but to have that formalised link to the experts is invaluable to us. And hopefully for more favourable for external funding bids. You know, you never know if you're in a funding round with somebody and this is a National Nature Reserve where something isn't. Hopefully that tips us the edge to achieve greater external funding. But for me personally, one of the big things is to get the pride of the local population and really boost their. People tend to be very proud of their area, but they're very self-effacing about it, and they won't sing its praises at all. But now we know we're globally important, and we've got a National Nature Reserve on their doorstep. Hopefully their chests puff out a little bit more and their heads are held a little bit higher, and they feel personally invested in their green spaces, which we saw obviously through John's story and told you earlier, but this is another part of that, just keeping that momentum rolling, that they've got a real personal connection to their patch. So there we go. Jonathan, anything else you want to round off on that one?
No, other than I have to apologise because I'm going to have to leave just after 3. I've spent so many years coming over to Saltwells and just enjoying my time out there, both the Wren's Nest and the Saltwells. Every time I come out, I learn something new, and it's all about the people I'm meeting and talking to out there. So great on all of you.
Thank you very much. It's really appreciated. And so Graham, over to you, my friend.
Okay, well, welcome everybody, and thanks again for the invite to come and speak to you today. I'm Graham Walton, but I was born in Netherton. I grew up and played on this reserve, so I've got an association with the Saltwells, which takes me back to my childhood and throughout my formative years, and as a student and as a professional for the best part of the last 50 years. So this is a site that has a personal passion for me, but as you've heard from all of our speakers so far, it matters to a lot of people, and it connects us to a much bigger set of stories, the deeper time stories as this wonderful window on the ancient past, but also the current situation and the future aspirations. And one of the really lovely things is that the importance and significance of this site was recognised to the international community and by the international community in July, but in a way that celebrates the earth science but supports the local communities. This is the tagline of the Unesco Global Geoparks programme, so it ties up really everything we've been talking about so far. So it's an inspirational place with such deep connections to the story of us all. So if you move on to the next slide, Al, we'll begin about geoparks, because I imagine most people listening to this presentation don't know a great deal about this UNESCO program, what it is. So if Al, I should apologise right away. Alan's going to wear his finger out clicking because I actually put the individual bits of information to scroll up one after another to keep the thing moving. So Alan, you are my timekeeper. Keep things rolling. So first thing, unlike most UNESCO designations, the geopark is about collecting things together. It's not about one specialism. It's not about one little building or site. It's about much bigger things connected together to get the added value of all strands. So this is a holistic celebration, and UNESCO very much see the world, the natural world, as one entity. Natural history being the history of nature, they see it, and I see it as a geologist, as everything that's gone on in the past to create the world that we live in today. Now, on the 10th of July 2020, we became a UNESCO Global Geopark. Next, keep clicking now, and I'll talk to your clicks. So this is part of a global family, and we'll look at that in a moment. Next one now, please. And these are fundamentally large territories. So this goes well beyond the boundaries of an individual site or an individual structure. This is collecting a landscape together to tell a landscape story. In there you have to have exceptional geology, and that geology has to be protected. It has to have some degree of protection, preservation and wise use. Next one, please, Al. So it has to benefit people and nature. It's a difficult balancing act, particularly as you've heard Alan say, where you're in amongst 3 million people and there's a lot of pressures on the site. And some of that, particularly the irreplaceable geology, is difficult to maintain in the longer game, but there has to be an emphasis on sustainability and quality of life and environment for people. Next one, please, Al. To go with that, you have to have that vision for the longer term, and that's one of the things the community brings to Saltwells. The management teams have always had for Saltwells is this idea of a sustainable future. And if you click one more time, Al, UNESCO recognise all of these things. They've got these 17 sustainable development goals, and in there you've got all of the ones about environment, learning, quality of environment, innovation, employment, and climate change. So the geopark and this key site, Saltwells, sitting right in the heart of it, has this amazing role to play in the story of the world and the future of the entire Black Country area. Next slide, please. So where are these geoparks? Well, if we have a look around the world, and if you click one more time, please, Al, then you'll see they're scattered across the globe. And the globe is in connection through the environment and through the ground on which we live. So you can see there are clusters. There are 161 of these geoparks now in 81 different countries. 99% of these are quite remote rural areas. So they have quite a different feel to maybe the urban structures that we're talking about now. Okay, move on now. So let's have a look at the UK. Where are they in the UK? There's a cluster. So Europe has a scatter mainly around the more developed areas. UK has a scatter right the way across. So if we close in again now with the next slide, and let's see whether or not you've heard of some of these geoparks. So there we go. So if you take a look at the left, you'll see that they range from a group of islands like the Shetlands to northwest Scotland, the Highlands. Then we've got a border one at Marble Arch, which is County Fermanagh between the Republic and Northern Ireland. Then we've got the North Pennines. AONB is also a geopark because of the lead mining heritage there. We're right in the middle now as the newest one. And then you've got Brecon Beacons, or the east part of Brecon Beacons called Forest Bower, and then the Torbay area. There's a story behind that, but I'll come back to that later. Then if you look at us, we are not only slotting into that national picture, there needs to be a time zone represented in national nature reserves for the coal seams. We're a coal field. So if you look at that map of the Black Country, which is probably not like anything you've seen before, that patchwork quilt of colours, the central stripe, which is the grey and purple, the green and the bright red, is the coal field. And right in the heart of that is Saltwells National Nature Reserve. So if you move on again, please, Al. My slide, there we go. So if we look at this, then we began this project a long time ago, and just like the Saltwells and the work with local people to protect areas and move it forward and to create a future forward dimension, we did this too, and we started this initiative as part of a thing called the Black Country Urban Park that came out of the Black Country study. So it's slowly evolved into a concept that could be delivered. Those are the steps, and again, I know this series of slides will be shared, so rather than take time talking about this now, if you want to know all about that detail, refer back to this slide from the recording later on, but we'll move on to the more interesting stuff. So move forward again, please, Al. Okay, so it's a partnership. And just like all good stories, you have different characters, and that's true of the Black Country UNESCO Global Geopark too. The applicant is actually the Association of Black Country Authorities, because we basically look after the bigger territory together. And then you have that a lead partner, and Dudley is the lead partner, for various practical reasons, not least of which because they've got a geologist. Hi there. So we can speak for the geological connections quite well, but also because we've led on the urban park aspects for geology throughout. Then you've got the other big players. This is not the stakeholders, there's a huge amount of stakeholders below, but these are the key players. So you've got the Canal and River Trust, you've got Natural England, Eco Record, the Wildlife Trust, all in there, all coming together to manage together a much bigger thing, and to make sure that individual treasures like the Saltwells are well connected within the whole. Okay. So it's taking a little while for the slides to come up on my screen. So what is the Black Country these days? Well, the Black Country is not massive as a landscape, but it is a unique landscape. It's 356 square kilometres. Keep clicking through the. It's very strongly urban, which means that the green space is often treasured because it's all we've got. 1.1 million people live within the 4 boroughs, and then within that we have 200 separately identified communities that relate back to specific industries. You might think of leather making in Walsall or chain making in Cradley Heath. There's lots and lots of individual identity within. And if you ever found yourself falling out of an aircraft over the wren's nest, you would get this view of it. A lovely green oasis surrounded by 5,000 homes. This is the backyard, the playing space for 5,000 families, but it's also an international treasure. So there is this quite tricky balancing act that we do to make sure that everybody benefits and that the long-term sustainability is in place. Carry on, Al. Next one. So one of the really key features that connects a lot of the Black Country together, and certainly connects us to the Saltwells, is the network canals. There are currently 170 kilometres, which is genuinely twice what you've got in Venice, and it certainly smells better along our canals in the summer than Venice does. So we have this wonderful connection of blue waterways, and we have this incredible story that connects to the rest of the world of industrialisation, invention, ingenuity that spreads and changes the well-being of the world. So that's one of our key stories within this whole landscape. Next one, please. It's all right, I'm slowly getting the clicks. Oh dear, I've stopped. Here we are. Landscape. Click again, Al, please. Right. So next point about the Black Country landscape is that it isn't easily viewable. So that from one point to another, you can't see the landscape. So these are hidden gems scattered within it. So threading these together into a coherent story of landscape is another challenge we face here. You've heard it said before, I'll say it again, there is a real passion in the Black Country folks. We are very self-effacing, and we forget we are very capable and a creative bunch, and that is beginning to come to the fore in these larger landscape projects and the celebration of all the green spaces and the connections between them together. Move on, please, Al. So, where are they? Where are all these spaces that we've told the story of the Black Country landscape with? Well, the red dot in the middle there is Saltwells, very well located in the southern part of the Black Country coalfield. The stars across the landscape there are 40 plus more other features which pick up on parts of the story of the landscape. Wren's Nest, as you heard Jonathan say, is one of the oldest windows on time. It takes us way back to when this area was a tropical sea. Saltwells is absolutely fundamentally unique as the only place in the whole West Midlands region you can see a coal seam that is genuine and there to touch. There is nowhere else in this incredible coal field that you can still see the coal, genuine coal, as it once was mined. That is a phenomenal asset. What are these then? So what makes these geo sites within the geopark? So if we click down the next view, please, Al, we can see that they are a mixture of assets that are geological, biological, cultural, like Dudley Castle. We saw a picture of that earlier on. Usually they're a combination, but what makes them useful to the concept of helping people is they're accessible. You can get to them. You can see and touch the features. On site, they're looked after. And Saltwells is probably one of the best, if not the best example we've got of that wonderful liaison between local people, local communities, and professional management working together to make the best of a site. Facilities on site is a really important one for the Saltwells just at the moment, because we've finally got the base we've dreamt of for years. So if you are going to come to the site, we're going to attract inward investment, we're going to attract visitors and health and well-being, physical exercise. You need some focus on site. So we finally got that. And finally for this slide, the final click, which I can't remember what it is now, is interpretation. That's the one. So interpretation. So of course it's great having these sites, but you can walk on any of our green spaces, any of our parklands, and not really have a lot of information. So if you've got some interpretation on site, it's well balanced and it's put in the right place with the right kind of connection, you can really make the landscape come alive. And this is one of our challenges going forward. So move on to the next slide. Then you create literally a journey across a landscape, through a site, around a park, with the resources like this to engage what you are seeing with your own story. You can lead people simply through something that they are familiar with but really didn't know about at all. Move on to the next slide now, because this is just an exemplar of how great it can be, the stuff at Saltwells. The deeper story is more tricky. What's underneath your feet? Most people walking around a green space never really think about what's down underneath the soles of their feet. But in the Saltwells, there is a huge story of a hill being raised by these earth movements, of it being broken, and of it, as it's being raised, poking out these wonderful layers of rock that yield these incredible fossils, these time travelers from previous worlds that existed right where your feet are standing now. So we've got some interpretation ideas underway based on slices through the earth and layers of rocks as columns. So we'll move on from this. This is just an example to show you what we're working on. So that for Saltwells, we've got detailed, beautiful interpretation. It's an exemplar of what we can do elsewhere. Across the Black Country, we have a menu of fascinating things, cultural and natural, that is the envy of most of the other geoparks in the world. It is incredibly rich. When we did the audit of sites that had some designation, were recognised by some formal accolade, there are more than 2,000 in the Black Country. We selected 45 really key ones, but that will expand. We will build our capacity. And we have this incredible menu that most of our own Black Country folks are unaware of what's out there. So that's probably one of my key jobs going forward. Move on, Al, to the last couple of slides to finish off. So we want to make the connections. Saltwells, how is Saltwells connected to the other places? Keep clicking through this, please, Al. So obviously we want to connect it to the bigger world out there, and we want to connect it to the other geosites. So how do we do that? Well, what have we got? Well, walking and cycling routes is one, and if you look along the footpaths of Saltwells, they go somewhere. They don't just go around Saltwells, they connect out there. The canal network will connect you to 170 kilometres. Then we've got the old railways, the abandoned railways, such as the Pensnet Railway, which runs and connects right the way to our new beautiful visitor centre. We've also got, coming in right now, the new metro line, and that will connect just along the canal to the footpaths, which will get people to some of these geosites. And finally, of course, we've got the canals themselves. We've also got the atmosphere, the airways. So we have these beautiful blue, and final click for this slide, please, on. It is just how attractive and carbon friendly the movement between some of these sites can be. Onwards, please, Al, to the last but one slide. So there's plenty of ways of making the connection. If we have a look slightly more detail at the metro angle, so again, click through the slide if you would, Al. So there's the Saltwells again. Now we're going to show you where the current metro line is with the next click, please, Al. So that links Birmingham to Wolverhampton, but we are just creating the cross city lines. So if you click the next one, it shows you where this one goes. So when this does show, hopefully. Have you clicked it, Al?
I have.
Oh, it's not come up. Not on mine. Ah, it's there. Right, okay. So you can see now that we are trying to move away from road transport. Car parking is always an absolute pain. So if we can encourage visitors coming in from, say, the Birmingham end from the airport to come through along these routes, then not only will they get a sense of orientation of the space they're moving into, but they'll also be connected to all of these black dots on the plan, these geosites. Each one of those metro stations on the cross city line that we're working on at the moment, there's 17 stations. We're trying to get connections through and to green spaces, local heritage features, and these geosites. So there's a whole geopark way being created to link together the green spaces across the whole territory of the Black Country UNESCO Gold Geopark. Final click on this slide and then on to the last slide, please, Al. I'm sorry, my internet's terrible. So that is Parkhead Viaduct, where the metro line will cross over the canal and give a view of the landscape. Move on to the final slide, please. Sorry, I'm taking too long. I do apologise. So what do we want the geopark to be for us all, for all these green spaces, for all these features? Where are we going with all of this? Well, we need to connect it together. That's the first thing. Click right the way through this slide, please, Al. It's going to support and grow education products, innovation with conservation techniques. It's going to strengthen community and business links, particularly local hospitality. We've got some innovation going on with three-dimensional scanning of spaces, both indoor and outdoor. So some of these features can be captured, and some of the new links that we're making, and the COVID pandemic has created opportunities as well as considerable difficulties. Businesses can engage in different ways, and one of the sensitive ways in which we can highlight some of the features is to light up structures in non-biological areas such as the red house cone. So final click on this slide and we'll get to the end. Sorry, there's a delay on my internet connection. I do apologise. It's coming. Go on now, keep clicking. I'm very sorry, it's just so slow. Everybody's on the internet buying Christmas presents this afternoon, I think. And click beyond that one now, please. I'm sorry, my system's just not showing me the final slide. In a nutshell, we hope the geoparks really going to help people to see the landscape as a bigger entity, to see how the green spaces join together. We know it's going to raise the profile of everything you guys do for the green spaces, the education teams, give opportunities to friends groups to be more engaged with doing good work, to upskilling people, for boosting the economy. And one of the figures for the Black Country prior to COVID, I thought I'd stick in, is that one there, which is that in 2014, the visitor economy, people coming to the Black Country to either look at an attraction, visit a show, or stay over for a wedding or whatever, was worth about £900 million a year. By 2017, the same analysis shown that had grown by a considerable £50 million to £950 million a year, and that is without anybody knowing what we've got here. Before we got a UNESCO designation and our profile was raised. On the 10th of July, when we became a UNESCO Global Geopark, we had 9.5 million international hits looking at the Black Country designation. So it takes us into a whole new league of inward interest. One of the most important aspects of that is always going to be how we manage that for the community benefit. Finish off clicking this one and get to the very last slide, which is the thank you, Al. And so we're at the start of a journey. We're working with fantastic, world-class assets, such as the Saltwells National Treasure, the National Nature Reserve. And that will lead us forward into a future where the environmental issues are raised so that people are more aware of their impacts. We get a chance to be more connected to our landscape than ever before and provide more opportunities for everyone. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into the Geopark. I'm sorry I've talked so much, and I'm sorry my internet was so slow, but hopefully that's shown you how this national treasure has come from community asset to international jewel. So I'll shut up there. Thanks ever so much, everybody.
Alan, I've muted you. Alan, if you want to say something, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Just want to say thank you very much to everyone that's helped with them presentations, and I hope they've given you a bit of a taste of what's going on at the moment in Dudley and across the Black Country. So I will be quiet because I'm aware we've overrun. So thank you very much for everyone, and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, everyone, for your very, very inspirational presentation. Have we got any questions? Do you want to raise your hand if you've got a question, or put it in the chat alternatively? There's only 21 of us, so we can do it by raising hands.
Lawrence is raising his hand, I believe.
And yeah, Lawrence, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was very lucky enough to go and see Saltwells early this year as part of the Green Flag judging, and I was amazed at what I saw there, and a testament to all the work they're doing. It was fantastic, and I think more people should be aware of what's out there and enjoy what we've got on your doorstep, really. So yeah, it was congratulations to you all, and especially getting the NNR. So it's onwards and upwards. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lawrence. James, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wondered, when you were first going through the process of declaring the NNR, did you actually get much wariness and objection from people? Because I know even creating LNRs, sometimes people have wariness about what restrictions it might bring.
No, received very, very little concern at all. I think people were really hopeful for it. I don't think I received one issue at all. Sometimes about the car parking, the amount of car parking and whether it's big enough to accommodate all the new visitors. But other than that, I cannot recall a single negative or cautious comment.
I'd echo that.
Pleased to hear it.
I just wanted to say that you know, John is a real inspiration, John Williams, for how he managed to cope with, you know, the very quick turnaround of the development and the planning application. And I was in Dudley at the time, you know, really hopeful that you know, the outcome was going to be good, which it was. Now I'm in Walsall. We've got a similar issue, and I think my colleagues will probably want to call on you, John, to ask you to come over and inspire people in Walsall.
I've actually already messaged John while we've been talking. Hopefully.
Yeah, just to say, genuinely, I was often the face and the voice of stuff that I knew very little about, or while I was able to give some time to that, there was such an incredible team of people that really kind of got behind the whole project. Even with the friends group now, they kind of won't let me go. I did offer to step down because I'm often very busy and not able to join in the practical things they're doing. But for some reason, they still like me telling them what to do and keeping them in order in a meeting. There are some absolutely incredible people, both part of the friends group and just other people that use that at the reserve for, you know, their kind of daily exercise, that kind of thing. And they're really the stars. I was given, you know, I was given a starring role, if you like, but the script was written by somebody else. So.
Great. Richard, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just either Alan or John, if I could get in touch with either of you. I've got a handful of proactive members that I just think would need some guidance to sort of be shown the way, hopefully. And so if that's something we can get together about, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
it's great.
Absolutely.
Anybody feel free to get in touch. So.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So we're going to break for about 10 minutes. Is that right, Alison? And come back in.
That's right.
Yeah, at 15:35, if you wouldn't mind. And then we'll carry on with the presentation from the Fields in Trust.
Hi, Liz.
Hello.
Chris Warman's just dropped a note that he needs to be away by 4. So,
should we put him on early or?
Yeah, if that's convenient with Rodri,
Yeah.
When he's back in the room, we can check with him.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, hi, Rodri. Thank
Hi.
you. Are you sure that's okay?
Yeah, no problem. Ready to go.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Liz, and I'm back in the room. It's Jonathan here.
Hiya.
Welcome
I've
back.
made it. Yeah, thank you. In that time, I've made it home, and I'm awaiting my parcel. So, if there was any question, I'm not you know, if there was any questions, I'm very happy to answer them around NNRs. But there might not have been.
James just asked a question while you were out about if local residents had any issues to do with the designation, because he obviously has experienced problems with designating local nature reserves, which is interesting.
It was more whether, people who don't perhaps fully understand
what the
nature reserves are for
ramifications
people
are,
and nature these days, and whether there was any wariness about it restricting people's use of the site.
I think you'd have to ask Alan in relation to Saltwells.
Yeah, and they said not, which was positive, I thought.
So I'm not aware of anything. I'm not. I'm just thinking about the Wren's Nest. I mean, the issues on the Wren's Nest are all those urban issues, irrespective of whether you've got a national nature reserve or not. It's the classic built-up area with housing estates very close into the NNR. The key to it is that relationship with the local community, because if you get that right, then they're an asset to what you're doing. I think you all know this, and if you get it wrong, then at best they're neutral, but often they're not an asset to what you're doing. So it's, so what's been such a success at Saltwells and at the Wren's Nest in recent years have been the friends groups, which have really, really helped in different ways with the looking after those NNRs.
Good.
I think it's a good question though, James. We've had a few inquiries about the Geopark and the Geo Sites as well. The change to a UNESCO badge, does that impose any more strict requirements? And the answer is no, not for the geopark. It is about those relationships and about, with development in particular, early consultation so that everyone talks about what the concerns and issues are. So, yeah, the Saltwells, I'm aware of nothing at all that came back.
Good. Good.
Okay, so we've all had our 10-minute break. We're changing the agenda slightly in that Chris Warman needs to get away by 4. So Chris is going to do his presentation now about our response to the government's COVID-19 restrictions and the various tiers that we've now been put in. So Chris, can I hand over to you?
Yes, apologies for no camera. I've had a power outage this morning, so it's sort of knocked all sorts of problems. So, but I am here, which is a shame because I've got fairy lights up in the study. I've got a Christmas jumper on, but never mind, you're missing all that. But apologies about that. It's really just to update you on the tier system because we had lots of questions last week coming to us as we moved out of lockdown into the tiers. As most of us are either into tier 2 or 3, and to be fair, I think most of us actually are in tier 3. It is quite confusing, some of the guidance information. And I have emailed Alison this morning a link to Sport England that have produced quite a handy guide actually to help us through it. But the headlines for you is the facilities that were all closed can reopen. So that tennis courts, basketballs, skate parks, BMXs can reopen, and gyms can reopen, green gyms, as long as they're all COVID secure. The bit that becomes far more complicated is when it talks about spectators to any of those. Because in tier 2, the rule of 6 applies to spectators, including grassroots sport. But in tier 3, spectators are not allowed unless it's juniors or under 18s, and then their parents are allowed, but only in their household support bubbles. So it starts to get very confusing and very detailed, so apologies about that. But the Sport England guidance does help you through that, because I know a lot of us are getting lots of calls. And I was on with the Birmingham FA yesterday that they're equally as confused. They've produced on their own guidance, which actually is more confusing than the government guidance. So they're reviewing their guidance. But if you stick to Sport England, it is slightly clearer. So all organised sports back on. So football's back on. Even rugby can be allowed. So that's not too bad at all. And running events can restart. So you can have running events again, albeit I believe parkrun is not going to start until the new year, was what I was told yesterday. Again, they all have to be with their COVID secure risk assessments to make sure they're following the relevant guidance. The difference possibly this time, especially around the sport and spectators, because it is confusing, the leagues and the national bodies will be taking action against those clubs that don't conform. So if they're not controlling spectators, they could be dropped from leagues or lose match points and things like that. So the governing bodies are taking a far more stricter approach to try to keep sport going, because I think the government's made it quite clear, if not, then things will stop dropping back off again. And there's already possibly talk of a lockdown version 3, which sounds like an awful movie, which is nothing like the original. Is the only way I can describe it. So we don't want to go down that road at all. So that's basically it as we are. Most things are back on, but it does change from tier to tier. If you're in tier 3 now, and on the 19th of December going to tier 2, some of those detailed regulations do change. So just keep an eye on that guidance. I believe in terms of volunteers, Sam's just asked a question. I think all tiers are the same. Volunteering is allowed. albeit with COVID secure risk assessments and socially distanced. So basically, as we were doing it pre-lockdown 2, which was the second movie in the series, obviously. So volunteering can continue. The other bit, which makes it even more complicated, as it all moves around, it's like a moving feast. If you're in Tier 2 playing sport, you can't play a team from Tier 3, and vice versa. So a team in Tier 3 cannot go and play a team in Tier 2. So somewhere like rugby, for example, which is on the boundary with Northamptonshire, a lot of our clubs are cross-border clubs. So, but basically most matches are off because they play each other, and rugby is in Tier 3, Northampton's in Tier 2. So it's a moving feast. But if I refer you back to the Sport England guidance that Alison sent out in that link, it does help you through it. And I'll stick to that guidance because the governing bodies are getting very confused. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of assistance as we continue to battle on through the guidance around this. Any comments, please drop us an email. I've got another call with government next Tuesday, so I can feed back again to Cabinet Office if any of this is causing any more issues than we've already got, to be fair. But we are trying to ease out some of these issues to us all. Hope that's useful, and apologies, A, for technology, and B, for moving Fields in Trust about. So thanks to Fields in Trust.
Thanks, Chris. Have we got any questions from anyone? Again, show hands. Can't see any. James.
Chris, on the football club thing, I hadn't really thought about that, about clubs coming cross boundary to play each other. It'd be interesting to know if the FA are kind of getting that message out clearly to clubs, and presumably the onus is on the club, because the one team who books the pitch off us, for example, might be our local Tier 3 team, but we won't know if they're playing a Tier 2 team.
The FA issued some instructions yesterday and then quickly took them back in again because they weren't correct. Because they were struck in with the interpretations as well. But they have issued more guidance this morning, I believe, basically saying you can't play a team from a different tier. So the club should be aware of that.
Okay, all right, I'll have a look. Thank you.
Chris, we're getting quite a lot of pressure from our fun fairs, our showmen who haven't been able to make any money in the last 9 or 10 months. So they're thinking about, next year and February in particular. What is the position in Tier 3 with fun fairs? Do you know?
I believe Tier 3 they're not allowed.
Okay.
I believe.
I had a bit of a read through the guidance, and I sort of thought, it's kind of, you can't have indoor things in permanent. You can't open indoor things on permanent theme parks and fun fairs, but it kind of, by implication, it was you can still open the theme parks and fun fairs. So it was a little bit confusing.
I think visitor attractions are closed in Tier 3.
Yeah.
So it depends what the class does. Legal definitions do vary. I run everything past our legal team now, just on the safe side.
Right.
Because it is a little bit complicated. But yeah, if you're unsure, check your own legal teams.
We
I
were
believe
quite
all
strict
visitor attractions
because they were travelling fun fairs, and we thought previously that they weren't static ones, and we might consider opening static ones, but we wouldn't open travelling ones. And I think probably it's the same.
Yeah, we're suggesting that nothing before Easter. I don't think is realistic. What we're saying to them.
Yeah. Right.
If there is any other questions, just drop an email to me.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Right, we will return back to Rodri and Fields in Trust.
Hi.
Hi, Rodri.
Hi. Is the presentation there ready? The PowerPoint.
It is, yes, Liz. Can you do you want me to share my screen, or can you control that?
I haven't got the presentation, I'm
No.
afraid.
I've got that. So shall I share my screen from this end?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I've got it up on my screen and it's working. And I'm trying to share content. Do you need to unblock anything, Liz, your end, to allow me to share?
Don't think so.
If necessary, Alison, just share your whole desktop and make sure that that's the window that you're on.
Okay. Can you see that now?
No.
Any luck?
No.
Shall I make a start? I suppose that, well, the one thing I wanted to show is the video at the end. So if you're able to get that ready, I can try and talk through everything else.
I've never had a problem sharing before. It's really odd. I'm going to turn my camera off, see if that helps. And then I'm going to try and share again. No, sorry, it's just not coming up. Just don't understand why. Okay, sorry about that all.
Can you share from your end, Rodri, or not?
No, I'm sort of, my Teams is operating outside the platform where the PowerPoint is, I'm afraid. I can I'll try and talk through it.
Oh, this looks promising. Yes. Yeah, Alison, you've got it.
Okay, I don't know what I did, but that's great.
You could just go to slide. Yeah, brilliant.
Great, I'll make a start. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to join your webinar today. I'm standing in for Angela Lewis, trustee of the Parks Forum, and Fields and Trusts head of programs and development manager for the Midlands. So I expect many of you will know Angela very well. Hopefully I won't let her down today. I'm the Fields and Trust development manager for Wales, but work closely with Angela and other colleagues throughout the UK. And on a personal level, a close friend of mine is from Dudley, so I'll have to tell him all about the National Nature Reserve at Saltwells. I've been a member of your equivalent body in Wales, Green Space Wales, for about 10 years now, and it's been quite a sad story, really, during the sort of early and middle parts of the past 10 years, as local authorities were dealing with budget cuts, and many faces were disappearing from around the table. People with lots of experience and expertise, and I remember some meetings with small numbers in attendance, so it was quite depressing. But encouragingly, the group has had a resurgence in recent years, with meetings well attended and more authorities and relevant organisations joining. So it's a lot more positive now, and I know it's following closely the progress of the new Parks Management Forum, which I expect you are too. Anyway, I'm here to talk about Fields and Trusts, and specifically our protection work, and I'd like to go through a few slides. If you could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, if you could press play, great. Yeah, this is a sort of animation. It's a timeline of the sites we've protected since our founding as the National Playing Field Association in 1925. Early on, it was mainly the King George's Fields, established in memory of our founder, King George V, and then sites protected by way of covenant as a condition of grant aid, and also many sites gifted to Fields and Trust or National Playing Fields as well as the association, as was then by landowners to ensure their preservation. We protect, it'll come when it comes to the end of the animation, you'll see we protect 2,870 sites in total throughout the UK. And what is interesting is that 1,732 of those sites, nearly 2/3, have been protected in the last 10 years. Mostly QE2 fields celebrating the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012, and more recently centenary fields marking 100 years since the First World War. So those 1,732 in the last 10 years, which against the backdrop of austerity is incredible, really, with the Parks departments suffering, as I indicated, with sort of people we lost in Green Space Wales. But I think it shows there's a clear appreciation of the importance of parks and green spaces and the need to protect them. I think if you look at the final graphic there and all the dots, you can see in the Midlands at least that wherever you are, you're not too far away from a site protected by fields and trusts. Go to the next slide, please. The need for protection is more relevant than ever with budgetary pressures and the need for housing, which I'm sure you're all aware of. Once a piece of land becomes threatened with development, it can disappear very quickly, and it's encouraging to see how the nature reserve in Saltwells was able to avert the threat there. Here circled, the light green circle, is the Wilfred Owen Memorial Playing Fields in Ingleborough Road, the Wirral, Merseyside, named in memory of the celebrated War One poet. If you could go to the next slide, please. And however, despite being subject to a covenant, they were sold for housing development. In just 1 year, the space that had been used for generations for organised team sports has gone from a playing field to a built-up area. I'm sure everyone will know of a park playing field or green space that has been lost. I remember growing up myself playing football on a lovely pitch, a lovely surface, but that now is a roundabout. Next slide, please. Yeah, in comparison, here's a field that's protected in 1938 as the King George's Field, and this probably encapsulates best what Fields and Trusts is about. On the left, you can see the field pictured in 1946. Very little sort of housing, small little village. On the right, you can see the same field pictured 70 years later. You could see the level of development that has taken place around it, how that village has grown massively, and without protection, you wonder if that field would still be there. Importantly, you can see no new green spaces that have been built into the surrounding developments, and making the site that we protected even more important, serving the whole community. And this also illustrates sort of how the protection of land can act as a fantastic memorial, a lasting memorial. King George V died in 1936, yet the playing fields that bear his name are still going strong. There's just over 500 in the UK altogether. Through the next slide, please. So the protection of green spaces. There are a number of ways of protecting parks and green spaces. No one alone is sufficient to safeguard them, but together they can provide an effective framework of protection. First and foremost is the need for quality provision, well designed to high standards, located where it'll be of most value to the community, landscaped appropriately, maintained to the highest possible condition. If this applies, then the site's the best chance of being used and valued, and therefore unlikely to be targeted for development or disposal. I'm sure all you will know of a site or a park which is so important to the community, you can't ever imagine it being targeted for development. In the main, however, we rely on the planning system, the town and country planning law. It has much to offer, but it doesn't support the statutory protection of parks and green spaces, and planning policy is open to interpretation. There's the local green space designation in England. Unfortunately for me, it's not in Wales, but a weakness in it is short term. It only applies for the length of the plan, of the local plan, and reviewed every 5 years. There are also covenants, which, as I mentioned, we have used, Fields and Trust has used in the past, but they have their weaknesses. The Wilfred Owen Memorial Fields, which I showed earlier, which was subject to a covenant, being an example. If you go to the next slide, please. So, protection with Fields and Trust. How do we protect land with landowners? We have a unique deed of dedication which provides robust yet flexible protection in perpetuity. It uses contract law to establish a legally binding commitment between Fields and Trust and the landowner. It is independent of the planning process, so even if planning permission has been obtained, Fields and Trust consent is needed for any changes. The deed enables positive recreational development, which includes ancillary structures and buildings such as pavilions, changing rooms, storage facilities. Landowners are free to change the recreational mix, such as installing outdoor gyms, play equipment, moogers, tennis courts. We don't seek to micromanage. It's how you want to set out to design the land. There's no specifications of what facilities you provide and sort of maintenance schedules. As long as it's open and safe to the public, then that's fine with us. We just ask that you keep us updated. So for our records, each site has a dedicated web page on our website and detailing the facilities, description and things. So we like to keep that up to date. In protecting with Fields and Trust, land remains in the ownership of the existing landowner. There's no sort of transfer of ownership, and management also remains the same. In terms of the types of land that we protect, it is pretty much all types of space accessible to the public. Fields and Trust, and before that National Playing Field Association, have traditionally been associated with land for sport and play, with our planning guidance focusing on those facilities. But we will protect any space important and accessible to the community, including, for example, nature reserves. And perhaps once the ownership issues have been sorted for the Saltwells, perhaps we can work together to protect that as well. For the next slide, please. So in terms of the protection process, the landowner completes an initial application. We get a lot of applications from various bodies and groups wanting to protect a particular site, but it has to be the landowner, as they will be entering into the legal agreement. We will carry out some initial background checks in case there's any sort of existing restrictions or covenants that aren't compatible with our protection. Then we will carry out a site visit. It's just to make sure it's suitable for protection. Those are proving a little difficult at the moment with the pandemic, so we are sort of asking landowners if they can provide recorded videos and photos of the site so that we can have a look at them. Then we will draft a deed, the deed of dedication. That is sort of checked and agreed with the landowner before it's signed and executed. Land registry titles for the site are updated, so they include details of the deed of dedication, and then we'll provide a commemorative plaque, so it indicates the public that it is protected with Fields and Trust. And finally, we would also encourage local celebration of protection. The landowners carrying out an act of goodwill in safeguarding an important facility for the public, so it's only right that we celebrate that. And next slide, please. So why protect with Fields and Trust? Well, don't take it from me. We have this quote from a local authority officer in Northern Ireland. He said that sandy bay playing fields are such a part of the community that everyone feels as though they have ownership of the green space, and you can't put a monetary value on that. So protecting these spaces for the future means that people will be able to spend time there enjoying green spaces for generations to come. Also on the next slide, if you could go on, please, we have this short video. It's about a site we protected. If you're able to play that, I'll let them speak for themselves. If you might not be able to, I can't hear that, but there are subtitles, so. No, that's fine. You're clearly more technologically advanced than me.
I'm going to just restart it because I've increased the volume. So just go back. Can you hear that?
Alison, I think it's to do with when you just first choose to share, there's a button that you click to say share sound as well. So we can either just watch it with the subtitles or you'd have to start sharing all over again.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. Yeah, that was just one example there of the many sites we protected around the UK, and you can see there sort of how important that space was to the town of Hailsham, and they were only too pleased to protect it, to ensure it remains for future generations. I think that sort of concludes my sort of presentation on the protection work. The chair did mention at the start I was going to talk about a toolkit. I wasn't aware of that, but I'm sorry about that. But perhaps it was about the Watch This Space, which is a resource for communities to champion and support their local green spaces, helping them with campaigns to fight against threats to parks and green spaces. Got lots of useful information of the planning system, planning policy, and sort of an example of letter of objection. So if that was the toolkit, I can send a link to that, which I'm sure you'll find helpful. But other than that, that's it for me. Thank you for your attention, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Rodri. That was really interesting. Have we got any questions from anyone?
Hello?
Is that you, Lawrence?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Just interested, I've never really thought about it, but obviously there must be a cost to set up the protection of that piece of land, and obviously that cost would probably change with the size and the scale and what's involved, really. But is there any guidance on costs for protecting that, going to that with Fields in Trust?
We don't apply any. There's no fees for applying and protecting. The only sort of costs you would incur is is if you use a solicitor to help you through the sort of process of completing the deed of dedication. There's also some small nominal fees or sort of entering the details on the land registry titles. And also we would ask that you install a plaque. So any costs or either. So yeah, the main would be if you're using a solicitor.
Right.
But we have our own solicitor that would be happy to sort of guide you through the process. It's fairly straightforward. A lot of authorities are able to manage with that one.
Magic. Thank you very much.
Stuart, do you want to say something?
Yes, I just got. I think you've kind of answered it, but we have a situation where we've quite a few football groups and that wanting their own little place kind of thing. We've quite a few parts where, you know, they're actively seeking kind of a license to maintain a pitch and possibly the building or the park pavilion as well. Presumably the Fields in Trust designation would preclude that, and because I think you've said on one of the slides that the ownership, management and maintenance needs to be retained by the landowner. I just wanted to double check that was the case, really.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that over recent years, sort of local authorities looking to sort of you know, offload the sort of liability of managing and maintaining facilities, and there's been a lot of leasing of sports facilities. It depends really. If they have been approved, but it depends on the individual circumstances. If it was like a one pitch within a larger site where the public still had access to the majority of it, and that the particular club that was taking on the lease had an open membership policy, so it was effectively a sort of a community club, then those cases have been approved. But if it was a site which was mainly consisted of pitches and one particular group were trying to take on lease for the whole site, then
really.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's good because there obviously you get political pressure and things with as well with some groups, you know, and wanting their own sort of facility. So it's just good to know that in some way, you know, the designation kind of helps to protect and make sure that the facility's there for everyone, really, which is what I guess it was aimed at when they were set up, really, you know. So that's good. Yeah. Thanks.
Is there anything else from anybody else? Nope. Thank you, Rodri.
Okay.
James, can you go on to the next slide? That's it. Yeah. So that's it really for today. Alison's asking you to do an evaluation for the webinar following that link that she's provided. Because we're still funded through the lottery, it's really useful to have those evaluations. So really appreciate it if you would do an evaluation. It's really helpful, and do it now before you forget. Next slide. Alison, do you want to come in here?
Yes, I'm just pasting the link into the chat there as well, so that will make it easier for people, because I know what it's like once you've left the meeting. It's another thing to do. So I'm just copying that now, and I'll paste that for you. Yes, so the other information we wanted to share is our next webinar in January. At the moment, we've got a definite sort of booking from the Landscape Institute, who'll be talking about the skills and competency development and how that would work. And also there are 2 opportunities for all our members to take part in training, which we are subsidising again through our lottery grant. Thank you to those people who've already booked places. So that's Introduction to Parks Management, which will take place at the end of January, and then advanced park management, which is in February. Some people have booked on both, so they're very keen to take the whole journey there. So that's really, really good. But please let me know if you want more information. I can send you the links through to the ABSI webpage, which gives lots more information. The introduction training they mentioned recently had 100% positive feedback. So I think the courses have been remodeled, redesigned, updated with COVID in mind, updated to be more appealing online. So hopefully that will appeal to lots of people there. So just drop me an email if that's something you want more information on.
Lovely. Next slide.
Okay, and just again from me, thank you to everyone, the whole team at Saltwells who've put everything together. Rodri for standing in for Angela, who's been furloughed for this month. So it's really helpful, and I think just having that connection and having the resource, because the recording will be available on our website. We'll get that up there next week. It's just a resource for our members to go to if they're experiencing problems. And I think we've all been in that situation, you know, even in a small scale with small losses of land. So I think to be forewarned and forearmed is really helpful. I'd just say from when I was in Walsall, I did 3 pieces of work with Angela to secure 3 pieces of land that were in urban areas. And there's I think the toolkit, I think Angela mentioned that's in sort of development at the moment. When that comes, that would be really helpful, because I think from local authority side, there's a whole process, you know, that's lengthy and detailed. And in Walsall, we had to have, and as I'm sure others do, have cabinet approval. So that was quite a journey from our side as well. Angela was really supportive. The legal team at Fields in Trust I found really supportive as well, because you can sort of set aside a year really from start to finish. So it was a job well done in the end. Really pleased we had the opportunity to do that. So thanks again, and that's it from me.
Lovely. Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas and stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks to the speakers today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.